as Tom mentioned, my name is Josh. I am the President and Director of Veterans Outreach for Deep Sea Valkyries. Also on the call with us is Nisa. Nisa, could you wave real quick? Nisa serves as our Director of Business Operations. So if you have any questions related to that side of how the program works, costs, some of the background on how we actually make this happen, she's probably the best one to direct your questions to. And as we're going through this, I'm going to ask her to update in the chat function some of the information that we may be talking about. So she may be providing some information as we move on. This slide deck's also going to be provided. Tom, I'll either send this to you or Carl so that you guys can upload it and share it with the group. I'll convert it to a PDF so that it's ready to go for everybody. Let's see here. There we go. Oops. So just a little bit of a background on me. I'm a 15-year veteran of the Army. I spent my entire career in the country. Served at the Pentagon after 9/11, and then I had multiple deployments to Iraq. Spent a lot of time doing different types of operations throughout the world. So the veterans that we assist, I really have a deep understanding of kind of what they're going through, as well as the rest of our staff. Our mission's very simple. You can read it right here. Really, we're working with veterans that are dealing with issues such as post-traumatic stress, other combat-related injuries. We're introducing them to healthy outdoor activities, and a big part is we're assisting them in their transition from servicemen to civilian itself. Won't go through an entire history. As Tom and Carl have been talking about, there's a lot of information out there on suicide and suicide data. Really, the catalyst to how our program started, though, was in April 2014. 8 different veterans that I served with all committed suicide in a 6-week period. And it was that those series of events that was really the catalyst for Nisa and I to begin this program. Your typical experience with any veterans that's going through any sort of trauma treatment, they're diagnosed with PTSD. And for those that are looking for a very simple definition, it's really just an abnormal reaction to a traumatic event. I think at times the clinical definitions tend to overwhelm men and women when we're talking about this. But really what it boils down to is just an abnormal reaction to a traumatic event. Everyone goes through trauma in their lives in one form or another. And we're just working with those people, the men and women that are having those abnormal reactions to it. In other words, we talk and we discuss about having a reaction to trauma is a very normal thing. We're getting after those abnormal reactions to get them past whatever is preventing them from living a full life. Oftentimes, as we know, these diagnoses can be months to years from when the actual traumatic event happened. And as Tom discussed in the beginning form of the slides, the traditional modality was very much weekly or monthly group counseling sessions, and it was combined with an opiate-based medication. Now, we're never going to say that the VA should be faulted in this. It was what they knew, it was what they understood, and let's be honest, the VA is dealing with a very, very large population, and to make dramatic changes, to make sweeping changes on a system that big can be very difficult. And that's why I think organizations like Rancho Milagro, Deep Sea Valkyries, and a number of other organizations are key, because we can make those small incremental changes that can have very positive and large-scale impacts, which hopefully then can be replicated around the nation. Oftentimes, the men and women that go through these programs are evaluated and released or returned for more treatment. But we always said, is there a better way? Our Director of Clinical Services, Jeff Hensley, said when he went through this traditional mode of treatment when he first got out of the military, he said he felt trapped into forced intimacy, meaning that these groups that he was going to weren't really designed, the environment wasn't really established to create intimacy between the counselor and those that are being treated. And when you don't have an accepted level of intimacy between those two entities, when it's a forced kind of an environment, that actually creates natural barriers to effective treatment. And so Nisa and I, along with the other individuals that worked to form this program, that was a big part of what we wanted to address, as if there was a better way. And so we started really looking into alternative therapy. And for us, there's really 2 key components. We wanted to have effective counseling, but we wanted to couple that with meaningful activities. On the counseling side, and I'm not an actual counselor, all of our counselors are veterans, they're all professionally trained, they are licensed clinicians that specialize in combat trauma. But we want to make sure that the person is ready, the person is invested, and the environment is trusting. Without those three components, studies tell us that the individual is not going to be engaged, and they're not going to have that intimate relationship that's needed to actually affect meaningful treatment and to have a meaningful transition. But then on top of that, we wanted to incorporate some sort of activity that is going to help, it's really going to help foster these counseling sessions. And for us, we had to look for an activity that was going to transcend whatever trauma these men and women coming to us have. We wanted to make sure that it could be something that would invigorate the group and that it's going to invoke individual emotions. All of our counselors have said that anytime you bring together a group of participants, if somebody can't participate because their physical injuries don't allow them to participate, we know they're going to withdraw. If it's an activity that doesn't invigorate the group, if it suppresses emotion, if it's an activity that wears them out to a point where they can't actually engage at a mental level, then the overall experience is going to be detrimental to the group. And evoking emotions is a big one. We know that in the military, especially during times of heightened alert where there's combat, high training situations, we tend to suppress our emotions. We have to. It's a survival instinct, and it allows us to really succeed on the battlefield. That being said, when emotions are truly suppressed, it makes it very difficult to basically process that trauma. And so we wanted activities that would help engage emotions. It would be events that would allow these men and women to express emotion without it being a very deliberate and a very almost a commanded event. We want it to be very natural. And as Jeff always says, he says, sometimes the best therapy takes place outside of the office. And that's what we have found given our program. So each of our retreats, they're a week long. They have a three-tiered approach. We have the mind, the body, and the soul. When it comes to the mind, we have 30 hours of group counseling and then up to 15 hours of individual counseling. Again, these are led by licensed clinicians that specialize in treating trauma through the use of cognitive behavioral therapy. Then we have our activity. These are all marine-based eco-adventures. The primary activity that we do is scuba diving. However, given the area we're in, we do deep-sea fishing, and then we go explore some very, very remote islands. And the last one is the soul. And as it was talked about yesterday, the idea of moral injury is becoming more and more understood. It is becoming more of an accepted, understood trauma. And so we do have a chaplain that attends the retreat, and they actually lead the group in daily spiritual devotions, which takes the time to look at historical figures that we associate with critical events. And we may not assume, or we may have assumed that they didn't go through these moral injuries. And so we look at what kind of happened to them after those historical moments. How did they process those events? But here's what we're really here to do. We want to talk about why diving as an alternative therapy. So what does the actual act of diving do for the veteran? Most people assume that scuba diving is just something that you do recreationally. A lot of people assume that it's a sport for very healthy individuals that have a whole lot of money that can go to these wonderful places around the world. We found that through my own treatment, following back injuries, following some spinal surgeries, that scuba diving was actually recommended to me by my spinal surgeon. And so here's one of the big ones. Diving, it transcends almost every physical injury. It doesn't matter if you're an amputee, blind, partial blindness, partial hearing impairment, paralysis, whether it be full paralysis, partial paralysis, but diving can actually transcend these injuries. And while there are a lot of sports out there that have been modified for individuals with physical disabilities, you don't have to look very far. The Paralympics is a great example. What's wonderful about diving is there isn't really any modification that we have to do to the equipment to get it ready for somebody with some sort of a physical injury or physical disability. So from an administrative and a logistical point, it's very easy for us to adapt from somebody that might be 100% able-bodied to someone that has different levels of disability, whether it be Kyle, who's pictured right here, who was was a single leg amputee below the knee. We've had some people with some gunshot wounds, nerve damage, etc. Everyone can participate at a very, very high level. It also transcends many mental disorders. There's this belief that if you have PTSD, a mild traumatic brain injury, or a serious traumatic brain injury, that you're limited in the sports you can engage in. Luckily for us, diving is one of those that is not limited by those disorders. Just like everything in life, we have different considerations, but our participants are able to engage with their peers at the same level, regardless of whatever their injuries might be. It also transcends and it unifies age ranges. So currently, the majority of all nonprofits really have a focused level of service to the global war on terror veterans, so that post 9/11 veteran generation. I joined the military prior to 9/11, so I kind of transcend, or I go over both of those generations. But we wanted to ensure that our program spoke to all veterans, regardless of the era and where in which they served. And diving allows us to do that. So we've had Vietnam era veterans, we've had Cold War era veterans, all the way through our current conflicts. So we've had retirees, we've had those medically retired, and we have those that have been serving on active duty. The other great thing about diving is for our veterans and part of our locally based program here in Arizona, it can also transition to those family members, whether it be a spouse, it could be children. So, regardless of your age, it doesn't matter if you're that Vietnam veteran to the current era of veteran, it doesn't matter if it's children to grandparents, but it's a sport and an activity that is therapeutic, but it can be engaged and shared with others around them, regardless of when they served or what their age is. The other big part of this is diving has many known physical and mental benefits. The American Psychological Association, as well as a number of other scientific journals and medical journals, have been studying different types of physical activities and how they can assist, whether it be veterans or just any individual that might have an injury. So what do they know about diving? Currently, they know that it lowers stress levels. Even though diving presents inherent risks, the level of training that's required, and even events that might be considered stressful, the overall activity itself is known to lower those stress levels. It also requires the engagement of different brain functions, which is critical for those that are recovering from either TBIs or PTSD. So the act of diving, whether it's dive science or the physical activity of getting ready to dive, has been known to help rewire or re-engage those neural pathways that have been damaged due to whatever that traumatic event was. There's increased levels of cardiovascular health, levels of flexibility, muscular strength. So just like our program tries to focus on those three different pillars, the mind, the body, and the soul, the known physical benefits of diving really addresses a lot of those points as well. So it's a nice compilation for one another. It's also an activity that focuses and brings attention to detail and helps to foster teamwork. The surveys that we receive and talking with our participants, we know that's something that they really miss when they are doing all of these different activities. It's also an outlet to explore, and it also brings about a sense of wonderment and awe. One of the biggest things that I missed following my injuries was the fact that I was told, look, no more skydiving, no more rock climbing, no more mountain biking, all those activities that I really enjoyed doing, and I wasn't allowed to do those anymore. So for the same thing with our other participants, those with those physical injuries and they can't do these things, they get to go and explore some amazing places. And the other one is it's the introduction and development of techniques to calm oneself during times of panic. We know that our participants can't just, anytime they're stressed, turn around, put on dive gear and go diving. Much like equine therapy, if you live in a city, you can't go out your back door and go jump on a horse. So we understand that these activities have to provide our participants with more tools that they can take home. So for a lot of them, they're able to fall back on their training, fall back on their experiences with us to get them through whatever might be triggering a panic attack, a bout of depression, to get them to the point where they can receive that intervention help that they're looking for in that moment. And this is what we've come to find out based on just speaking with our veterans. So over the last 5 years, over our voyages, some of the statistics that we've come about is out of our participants, 94% of them know a veteran that has lost their life to suicide. So they know at least one veteran that has committed suicide. The vast majority of our participants feel as if they've lost their community. They are taken from one environment where they're surrounded by their battle buddy, and then they're thrust back home for one reason or another, and so they don't have that intimate community they're used to. Again, the vast majority have experienced a moral injury in their time of service, and more than 3/4 of them struggle to forgive themselves for what they have seen or what they have done. But 88% of those that we surveyed throughout their weekend with us, they do believe that those moral injuries, they can heal over time. So that's good. It means they don't have this there is no hope kind of an attitude. They're looking for it. We're just helping to be the catalyst to kind of find that. And then, so what are the results? Because obviously this is a wonderful activity, and we can say all day long, we know that this works, but what do our stats actually tell us? So prior to our retreats, following our retreats, and quarterly afterwards, our participants conduct surveys. They're designed by the American Psychological Association. They're administered by our counselors. And they look at two things. They look at quality of life, and they look at levels of trauma. So in other words, how does your trauma impact you on a daily basis? And then based on how that trauma impacts you, what is your quality of life day in and day out? Everything from satisfaction with your sex life to how worried are you about finances. Pre-retreat, our trauma levels rank at 48.7. The APA says anything above a score of 20 requires some sort of an intensive counseling program such as ours. So our average score pre-retreat is 48.7. Post-retreat, it's 19.3. So we see a drop of about 29 points. It doesn't get them down to 0, but we tell our participants we can't fix you in one shot. We're really just to kind of get everything going. Their quality of life surveys, they rank at about 45. Anything generally below 50 is cause for concern as far as what your daily satisfaction is. Anything above 55, the target goal is always 60. Generally, that means you are overall satisfied with the vast majority of the different elements of your life. And our quality of life statistics generally show an increase of about 15 points. So our trauma levels are going down and our quality of life is going up. So if you're a numbers person, that's a great thing. If you're not a numbers person, this is what we're seeing from the qualitative side. So this is what our participants are going on and doing afterwards. And they're coming back and saying, hey, I was able to do this because of the tools that you showed us, what you brought to the retreat, and what they were able to take home with them. So you can see these are just some of the examples of what some of our participants have gone on to do. So we're super happy with what those results kind of are. And so, yeah, at that point, that's kind of all I've got right now as far as what the program is and why we kind of conduct diving as a form of alternative therapy. So yeah, that's about all I've got. Tom, Carl, how do I get this back to you?
Yeah, just click on me and make me the host. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Carl, I'll give it back to you. You got it?
Got it.
Okay, we got several questions. Let me see if we got. There was a chat discussion relative to the cost of the program. Nisha, you indicated $2,500. Is that borne by the individual participant, or do you have sponsor sources, or both, or some combination, or how is that $2,500 paid?
Sure. We actually raise those funds and we cover the costs for the veterans. What we have asked after learning the first couple of years, we also provided airfare to all of our participants. And in the kind of norm of what we see these days, we had people just not show up. So we did have to make some changes to how we provide that. We do have some partner organizations that will cover the cost of airfare for those that are in financial need of support. And we do also give them the opportunity to do things like a Facebook fundraiser, in which case we will reimburse them up to the total cost of their airfare if they do raise it through the fundraiser. So the only cost to the veteran themselves is the actual airfare to and from if they don't go through one of the other options to participate.
Okay. And another question for Deep Sea Valkyries, where are some of the locations that you go to?
For our main retreat in the summer, we go out of Nassau, Bahamas. We actually charter a boat. It's about 65 feet long. And we depart out of Nassau Harbor on a Saturday afternoon, and we steam about 10 hours south through the Exuma Keys. There are hundreds of little islands that make up the Exuma Keys, most of which are uninhabited. So we are in a very, very remote part of the world. We tell them going into this, you're not going to have any cell phone service, you're not going to have any internet service. And we do that for a very specific reason, is we want them to be focused on the counseling and the experience that's happening and not have them worried about things that are going on at home, so that they really can focus on what we're doing. So like I said, the main retreat every year does go out of Nassau, which we're finding out again this year is going to be a little bit challenging, because right now the Bahamas is still closed through the 30th of May and potentially extending their closure, which is going to preclude us from traveling in June as we were supposed to. So waiting to hear updates from the Bahamian government to see how that's going to go. But here locally, we use a local dive shop where we do our monthly events. It's out here in East Mesa.
Good. Vanessa, we had some technical issues. We'll follow up afterwards and get the best resolution. But Southwest Veterans Chamber of Commerce has been out several times to Rancho Milagro. It is a great place. You didn't have a chance to see all of the staff, to include the short ones, the two dogs that are just a great part of the Rancho Milagro personality and culture and DNA. A question for you, Vanessa, how are individuals referred to you?
A lot of times we get family members that hear about what we do, and they just give us a call and set up for the family to come out and experience equine therapy. We are referred by numerous chambers, partners that we partner with. We partner with Vets for Child Rescue. They send clients to us. It's pretty much through word of mouth right now that we get a lot of referrals right now.
And is there a cost to the veteran or other participant for your program?
Well, fortunately, we have a grant from Southwest Veterans Chamber. They have honored us several different times. And we have a grant with 14th Hour Foundation with Chris Pronto. And so we do have funds that are available for veterans right now. We do have an application process that we put everybody through just to make sure that everybody has skin in the game.
Good. Hey, Josh, I remember you recall a story you told me that one of the guys, one of the veterans with the lost the prosthesis resurfacing. Would you want to mention that?
Yeah, sure. So I think all veterans, you remember those times in service where something goofy happens, and to anybody else, they might be a little appalled, but you just can't help but laugh at the situation, particularly because there's nothing that you can do about it. Yeah, we were, it would have been year one, I believe, right, Nisa? Yeah, it was, year one, we were out on a dive, and the picture that we showed of our guy, he's got the lower leg amputee. It was during his retreat. His nickname is Peg Leg Racing. But yeah, we were in the middle of the dive, and I don't know what happened, how this all came about. I wasn't actually diving with him, and another guy was. And, yeah, I came by, and all of a sudden I saw a single leg kick by me, and I kind of caught my eyes, and I was like, oh, and he had his leg in his hand. And I looked at him and I said, you okay? And he said, yeah, he's fine. You know, he's just kind of kicking along. And they came up to the boat, and they went to reach down to give him a hand up, and he just kind of threw his leg up to the guy. And our captain, Drew, ended up catching this guy's leg and, you know, kind of took him by a little bit of surprise, and he hobbled his way up onto deck. But of course, the crew of our boat, they're not veterans. It was the first year that they had us, so they really weren't sure how to react to a leg being thrown up on deck. But we're veterans. We can all laugh at something like that. Kyle, that's his actual name, Peg Leg. He had a good laugh out of it. So yeah, we try and make the best of those situations. And he said that it was because he got into a program like ours where he was able to find those emotions. Remember, we said diving evokes emotions, and when you can laugh at and convert that trauma from something that's debilitating to something that invigorates you, something that you can laugh at. You know, it's a story of not only surviving, but now he's able to thrive given his injuries.
Yeah. Vanessa, a question we found throughout the week, or 4 days of a rally week, that for different veterans, different individuals, everyone is a unique case, and sometimes it's very different things that create that aha moment. Is there something in common that with the veterans, with the participants, that causes that aha moment to occur with the horses that didn't occur in other, you know, just as accepted and just as effective modalities, but just didn't work for those individuals?
Meaning with our horses, with an example of a session?
Yeah, or what, can you guess why for certain people is it the horse that triggered the aha moment when other therapies did not?
Great question, Tom. What happens is you're using all 5 senses when you're out here. You're out in, you know, just like what Josh was saying, I loved his example of, you know, there's something about being in the wilderness or out in the outdoors, especially in the water. That's such an amazing presentation, Josh. But just how it is so effective for that modality, it is for us too, because you're outside, you're seeing things, you're smelling things, you're touching things, your sensory overload is heightened. And so, and you're taken out of your environment, and you're fully trusting the process kind of thing. And I think because of that, your brain is heightened, and you're using different synapses of your brain that really give you the opportunity to grab and see the horse, because what the horses do is they literally mirror their environment. So if there's somebody that's struggling with anger or resentment or bitterness or any of those things, the horse will start exhibiting a behavior that's them. And so we have the ability to ask that question, hey, I see that this, here's an example, I see this horse is going in circles. Where does that show up in your life? Well, I'm going in circles and I don't know how to get out of it. And next thing you know, 45 minutes later, you're just talking about one movement that the horse did because they were mirroring the participant's life. Does that make sense?
Though, I recall the one example when we were out, we had one of the residents of James Walton home, definitely scared of horses, didn't want anything to do with it, and very calm, very, very, very casual, very slow, very quiet approach. And, 15, 20 minutes later, he was in the stable with them and arms around him. It really was a moving picture.
It was.
Hey, Josh, another question regarding where to go? Follow-up care for the participants after the journeys.
Sure. So as I mentioned, our counselors are all licensed and professionally trained clinicians. So one of the things that we do is, as part of their application process and as part of their assessments, we obviously know the areas that they're coming from. All of our counselors work with the individuals based on those trauma assessments. So where they were prior to the retreat to following the retreat. And then with their week at sea with us, our counselors identify in each individual potential follow-on treatments that would be more effective for person A versus person B. As Vanessa mentioned, and as we talked about, alternative therapy, different modalities work for different individuals, which is why it is so powerful, but why it's also a challenge for the VA. So our counselors are able to identify programs that would be potentially useful for our individual participants. And then we have staff volunteers throughout the U.S. that help to work to identify additional either counseling programs, volunteer opportunities, or other alternative type of programs that are local to their hometown, so where they normally reside. Additionally, as an organization, we host each year several events where we bring together our participants back together again. So we did one this past spring, similar environment, another week at sea, where it isn't as focused on the trauma counseling aspect as it is more peer-to-peer counseling, and it's an evaluation of, all right, where were you, where are you, and how are we moving forward. We had an event also in Florida where we brought together people back regionally, and we look at stuff where we have our largest density of participants. So we're looking at stuff out in California. So the aftercare treatment, there's a professional side to that where our counselors are involved and we can get them referred. But then there's more of a peer-to-peer asset or a peer-to-peer type of a follow-up program that we institute as well. So it's really, what is the need of each individual veteran? Is it more that professional route with some sort of professional services, or do we tie them into more of a peer-to-peer community where those type of programs are going to support them? So it's very specific on the individual veteran and where they're at in their individual treatment plans following the retreat.
Josh, I remember you telling that each participant keeps a journal, which is also an important part of the experience. Do they continue the journal after the voyage, or is that just while you're going?
Well, we certainly hope so. So part of the program, their workbook, as we call it, which has all the articles, it has all the information, that serves as kind of the launching point of their journal. In this booklet, they do a lot of different activities that are supposed to help try and realign their thought process. Cognitive behavioral therapy, if you're not familiar with it, is really designed to take whatever the traumatic event was and allow you to recraft that event in your mind so it isn't a paralyzing or debilitating event, but it's something that you can learn from, and hopefully you can draw strengths out of it so you become more resilient because of those events. One of the things we do, we practice gratitude in these journals. They log and talk about the things that they did that, again, helps to rebuild the synapses and the neural pathways that have been damaged. Now, what do they do with that afterwards? Some of them, yes, they continue with that journaling. One of our participants, Eva, she already liked to write. She continued that. She really developed a passion for it. She published a book. She's getting ready to do another book, and she's working on a movie script. We've had individuals that have been able to take that and excel either in their own personal blogs or writing. Some have gone on to do more professional work, given that they have transitioned to some sort of a professional career. So, Tom, it's really up to the individual veteran. We tell them we're going to provide you with every tool possible. We'll provide you with the counseling and the support for you to utilize those tools. But a big part of our program is, as they go through it, we get them to understand that, there's not going to be people there to kind of hold their hands for the rest of their lives. And so we're trying to empower veterans that regardless of their experiences and despite or maybe in spite of what they went through, that they've survived, and now they're going to thrive, and they're going to go back and be contributing members of society, and they're going to give back and continue to serve just like they did during their time in uniform.
Yeah. Obviously, this week we're focusing on veterans, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Rancho Milagro has kind of carved out a pretty reputable and highly regarded program for victims of child sex trafficking. Vanessa, would you like to say a few words about that?
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. I know it's a sensitive topic. And like I said earlier, we are partners with Vets for Child Rescue with Craig Sawyer. And he just came out with his documentary called Contraland. And that should be, you can view that, and it's quite descriptive, and it goes into the depth of what's happening with child trafficking. And we've had the opportunity to do a film about somebody that's in the trafficking world and then comes to our facility and gets back on her feet. But it's definitely a hot topic. But we have been working with trauma survivors in that demographic for about 6 years now, and the results are absolutely amazing. We get praise reports. I just had a phone call today before this call of a girl that she came out to us, I think, a year or 2 years ago, and she's like, Vanessa, it was life-changing, and it's still what she learned out here is still changing her life. And we're getting survivors that are going to college and successful in business. And so we just are a huge, huge fan of equine therapy and the modalities that it just offers lifetime skills and lifetime coping skills through extreme trauma.
Yeah, for those who may not recognize the name, Craig Sawyer is a former Navy SEAL. And I think he live in Tucson?
Yes.
Yeah, and his second career has been, I guess, through circumstances that you would never project, has led him to this field. So those of you that are in the counseling and coaching and referral business, just beyond our kind of functional emphasis on veterans, I know Vanessa and Bob would kindly and eagerly take that call from the child trafficking world if you're looking for a good local place for some help.